All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Families First Coronavirus Response Act, What You Guys Need to Know. My name is Emily Sokolsky and I will be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I would like to remind the audience to please feel free to submit their questions throughout the event via the Q&A box on your webinar toolbar. Our presenters will be answering questions at the end of this program. Any technical questions that you have will be addressed as soon as possible. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act established two new federal laws, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency Family and Medical Expansion Act. In this webinar, Affinity HR Group's Claudia St. John and Paige McAllister we'll go over the provisions of the new laws and what they cover and what they don't, and what you as employers need to know. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to pass it over to Claudia St. John to kick us off. Go ahead, Claudia.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everybody. Here we are again talking about coronavirus and employer responses to it. Just to start off so that you know, I have Paige McAllister here. She is the person who really knows everything and will keep me straight and correct me when I say things that make no sense, which does happen from time to time. Affinity HR Group is here. We are working very, very, very hard to try and answer all of the questions that businesses have had around how to deal with coronavirus. And so we really are committed to trying and getting as many answers, researching whatever comes out. It's very fast-paced. I mean, when I put this slide deck together 2 days ago, it no longer looks anything like it did then, just because of how quickly things are happening. Our contact is here. I'll show this slide at the end. My hope is to only take about 30 minutes of time providing content, and then hopefully to provide about 30 minutes time question and answer. Please do, all of the associations that we partner with have a really robust and very, very great coronavirus response page. So your association is the best place for you to start to get all of that information related to you and your industry and how to deal with this. Our website also has a blog. We're at affinityhrgroup.com. So check out that blog. We're posting everything there as well. Link in with me on LinkedIn if we're not already. And again, we are posting as much information, thoughts, whatever we can do to get information and guidance out to members as we go along. And, you know, we're all just kind of feeling our way, and it's been a wild couple of weeks. Somebody in my last webinar that I was just on before this one said, did you know that China reported this virus to the World Health Organization on New Year's Eve? It's only been 12 weeks that the world has even known about this. And here we are faced with a complete disruption, worldwide disruption. So we're all playing catch up and making it up as we go along, which gets to the next point. And Paige, I think I can hear you. So if you don't mind muting yourself.
Sorry, I had to close my door. So that's right.
You're fine, but if you don't mind muting yourself, then I will wait for you when I call for your help. But chime in anytime. What I want to say to you is that, again, none of us have ever been through this. This is a temporary situation. We are not going to be here for long. The choices that we're making are not permanent choices. Hopefully the repercussion of this global pandemic will not be lasting or long in effect, but for right now, the choices that you make in how to deal with your employees and how to deal with your workforce, in how to treat one employee versus another, these are not precedent setting. If you decide to offer expanded sick leave just for the next month, do that. If you want to let some people who can work from home, and other people who can't work from home, work from the office, or unfortunately in many instances laying them off, you can do that. This is not precedent setting as long as any of the choices that you make that are different for different employees, are not based on any discriminatory reasons, such as their race, religion, creed, age, disability, or anything else. So as long as you're not only taking the temperatures of a certain class of employee, and instead you're taking everybody's temperature, which I don't necessarily recommend, but we can get to that. You'll be okay. Everybody's situation is going to be different. Your employees' situations are going to be different. The people on this call, everybody's situation is different. And so we don't have all the answers. We are not attorneys. We do not know when this is going to be over. We do not know what tomorrow is going to bring. It's given us a great sense of humility because, Lord, oh Lord, it's all happening so quickly. But what I want to remind you is we are rubber banding and bubble gumming our way through this. We are using the MacGyver emergency toolkit to get through this. This will pass. What we do here is not permanent. It's just to get through the day. So the main content of this presentation is to go over the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. You will be getting a written overview of this act. This was rolled out a week ago today, and they are still sort of clarifying it, providing guidance to us. So we're trying to figure it out on the fly as things become clearer. And you know what? As things become more clear, things become murkier. So every clarifying thing that we get kind of raises more questions, but we're just slogging our way through it until we have all of the answers that we need. As Emily mentioned at the top of the show, there are two components to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Again, this is a federal law. Now, many of you in your states have other family leave, paid sick leave, other things that maybe were enacted before this or since this. We're only talking right now about the federal act. So you do need to pay attention to how it corresponds. If you need help with that, if you need help from us to help you figure out which one sets precedent, which one to comply with, usually the federal one is always the one that you comply with unless the state is richer. Hello, California. But anyway, we're just talking about the federal. So first, starting with the paid sick leave. So this is the Emergency Sick Leave Act. It applies for some unknown reason to employers with fewer than 500 employees. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me, but there you have it. It provides for 10 days of paid sick leave to full-time and part-time employees with 80 hours or an average of their part-time pay over the last 2 weeks or 6 months for part-time pay, to go back and see how you actually would calculate that. But it's 10 days of paid sick leave, and it's up to $511 a day per individual based on their pay, or a total of $5,110 max. That is to cover anyone being tested or treated or diagnosed with COVID-19. If you've been told by a doctor or government official to stay home due to a potential exposure, you would qualify for this emergency sick leave. And it covers up to 2/3 of regular pay, up to $200 a day or $2,000 max, for folks who are home because employees, their daycare has been closed down or the school has been closed down. So this 2/3 of regular pay is only for those who are tending to children whose schooling has been or daycare has been disrupted, or those who have a family member at home who is ill or affected with coronavirus that somebody is tending to. So this is the pay that you as employers need to provide effective April 1st. So starting April 1st, this is a sick leave that you have to provide to all of your employees if you're an employer of fewer than 500 employees. This is not, from our understanding, retroactive. So somebody who's already out, somebody who's currently on leave, on sick leave, this only applies on April 1st and going forward. In addition, the sick leave is fully reimbursed by the federal government. So while you do have to pay it, either for somebody who's sick or somebody who's tending to a sick individual or home taking care of kids, It is fully reimbursable. You have to apply for a tax credit each quarter to cover the amount, but what we've been reading literally just hours before we got on this webinar, because these changes are coming out, we just read that you can actually, let's say you have a workforce of 100 employees and you have one employee who is out on sick leave, you can withhold what you would normally pay in Social Security payroll taxes to cover the cost of covering this of providing this coverage. So rather than you can apply for the tax credit, not quite sure how yet, but you can also withhold your payroll tax in order to pay for this coverage. For employers with fewer than 50 employees, you may apply for hardship waivers, but only for the child-related absences. So only for those who are out with 2/3 pay because their child care has been disrupted or the children are home from school. By hardship waiver, what you really need to do is document that providing this child care, this coverage for those who are home with children who are not in school, would provide you financial hardship. You don't need to submit that, you just need to hold on to that, and I'm going to let Paige address that in a minute. You can also apply to have funds advanced to you. Still not quite clear on how that happens unless Paige has read something since we last talked, and I'm going to kick it over to UNISEC, Paige. And the Secretary of Labor has the right to exempt businesses with fewer than 50 employees from all of the provisions of the Paid Emergency Sick Leave Act, provided they are healthcare providers or emergency responders. Paige, any clarification on what I've just covered?
One thing I will say, well, a couple of things. One, it is April 1st. Everything that we had read and calculated and we had put out until now said April 2nd, because that is how you add 15 to the day that the law was passed, and that's what all the legal findings that we had read had concurred with that. The Department of Labor issued guidance this morning that said it goes into effect April 1st. So the confusion is from the Department of Labor, not us. Sorry for the confusion, but not a surprise things got changed. As for the waivers and the taxes, it does seem like you can do that from what we read at the Department of Treasury or the IRS. They both have the same guidance. Is you can you take it out as you submit your payroll taxes. You're actually going to deduct the amount that you have paid out for both the paid time off and applicable health insurance. So it should be immediate. If you don't have enough, if you had to pay out more than you can get refunded from the taxes, then you can apply for a refund, and they say that you should have that within 2 weeks. So they are really trying to get a quick turnaround on that. They haven't said anything about the advances, but that's one of those things that they are still out.
Great, thank you.
So, and I want one clarity too about the exempt businesses is healthcare providers and emergency responders are, regardless of size, are exempt from this. So but the Secretary of Labor has the right to exempt 50 or fewer. So I just want to clarify that the fewer than 50 employees may be exempt regardless of the industry.
Okay, so that's not just for those two healthcare emergency responders. Okay, so any employer with fewer than 50 employees may get an exemption from the Secretary of Labor based on what criteria? We don't know, correct?
Basically, what they're saying is the viability of the business. So if you can show that your business would go under if you had to pay this, then you may be granted a waiver. There's a lot of questions and a lot of gray area about that. Hopefully more is coming in the next few days. But the Secretary of Labor also has the right to not pursue charges if somebody doesn't do this. Basically what I read is that there's going to be a 30-day period of non-enforcement. As long as you're trying to do the right thing and you are doing everything in your power to follow the laws, even if you don't get it 100% right, there is going to be a grace period as long as you can show that you made a good faith effort. So that should help as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, so continuing on, what this means for you is that you have to post a notice of responsibility, of your responsibility to provide this coverage under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. That was supposed to come out today. When we get it, we'll provide a link to it through all of the channels that got you on this webinar in the first place. Still haven't seen it yet, though. You have to offer the emergency paid sick leave as specified in the statute, and you are not allowed to require that the employees use their PTO first. So you cannot require that your employees use any banked or eligible paid time off that they would normally have. This comes first. Employers can adjust your paid time off benefits after the law goes into effect. So you can adjust the paid time off that you provide to employees once this goes into effect. There's nothing to preclude you from doing that. You can also apply for a waiver or have the funds advanced if you have fewer than 50 employees. And again, you can apply for tax credits or withhold the payment of your quarterly Social Security payroll tax in order to pay 100% of this coverage and any related group health insurance costs that you may be carrying. Again, not quite exactly sure what some of those pieces look like yet. We will let you know as soon as we know. So now, the second piece of this is the Family and Medical Expansion Act. This is like an add-on to the FMLA. FMLA only applies, Federal Family Medical Leave Act only applies to employers with more than 50 employees. The old one, because this applies to every company with less than 500 employees, offers an expanded benefit. And it covers those who've been employed for at least 30 days and can't work remotely. So anybody who can work from home, this would not cover. If they can work from home, they're not covered. This is only for those who've been employed for 30 days, cannot work from home, and are unable to work because they have to care for a child who's not in school or on daycare. That's who's covered under this expansion. The first 10 days are unpaid, but they can use available PTO, or if they apply if they are covered under what we just talked about, the Sick Leave Act, they can use those for the first 10 days. Afterward, employers have to pay 2/3 of their pay, up to $200 a day, for 10 weeks. For a total of $10,000 plus any related health insurance expenses. That's the maximum that you would pay. Again, it's fully reimbursable through the way we just described it for the sick leave. So you can apply for reimbursement through your taxes or withhold your payroll Social Security taxes to offset any costs that you've incurred by providing this benefit. In addition, employees who have 25 or more employees, employers with more than 25 employees, have to restore the employee when they come back to a same or equivalent position without any loss of benefits. If you have fewer than 25 employees, you don't need to restore the equivalent, the same or equivalent position, but only if the position no longer exists because of some change in your company that are the result of the current coronavirus epidemic, or you make a reasonable effort to restore the position and either you can't for financial reasons or for some reason that would cause a hardship, or you just can't get the employee, you can't find the employee to come back to make that offer available. The Secretary of Labor can exempt employers with fewer than 50 employees due to hardship. Again, this is only for this Family Medical Expansion Act, which only covers those who are out tending to children who are not in school. A couple of really important resources for you. This is where we're getting our information, and I guide you to it. So I would go to either the IRS or the Department of Treasury has exactly the same site up, which is basically all of the information relating to the tax credit side of providing the Family's First Medical Leave Act provisions. So Google U.S. IRS and coronavirus, and you will find this. as well, the Department of Labor has a lot of information about how to provide this coverage. They have fact sheets for employees to see what's offered to them, fact sheet for employers, and a really, really good question and answer section. So Google the U.S. Department of Labor and coronavirus, and you will find this. And also the Small Business Administration does have information about small business disaster loans to small businesses because of the effects of coronavirus. We're not quite sure about all of the provisions as they're being rolled out, but this is another site for you to look for a low interest loan, there's sort of talk about whether that loan would be forgiven if you maintain your payroll. I have not been able to validate or verify that, so I'm not quite sure, but something for you to know about. In addition to all of this, if any of you stayed up super late last night, you would learn that the Senate passed a $2 trillion spending bill to deal with coronavirus. Now, this passed the Senate. So basically it passed the Senate and the White House approves of it. Now it goes on to the House. We don't know what the House is going to do with it, or as of like 2 hours ago when I checked, we didn't know. So it still has to clear the House and get signed into law. But what they passed is really important for you to know. So basically folks who are making up to $75,000 a year will get $1,200 payment from the federal government. Families who combined income is up to $150,000 will receive up to $2,400 plus an additional $500 per child. These are flat fee checks that are going out regardless of income up to this income threshold. For those between $75,000 and $99,000 or $198,000, there is an additional expansion. There's an additional payment that is scaled down. So what you will get is a reduction on the $1,200 and the $2,400. I don't have any details for you because literally these are just big bullets that showed up in news reports. We haven't seen any of the fine print yet, so no clue what the details of this look like.
And Claudia, just to correct you, it actually has not passed the Senate yet. They're voting on it today. They expect to pass it. The House, and that's as of an hour ago. That was the latest.
Oh
thing.
wow. Okay.
So, but it is in conjunction with the White House. So if it passes, then President Trump will sign it.
But it has to. But it also has to clear the House.
The House, which they're supposed to vote on it tomorrow.
Okay.
And it looks like they have made the concessions so that both parties are, happy and upset at the same time. So it has those caveats that both, kind of took care of all those issues that both sides had with the original bill. So it's expected to pass, but Senate today. If it passes, House tomorrow, and then hopefully President Trump will be signing it on Friday.
Okay, great to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The important piece for you is that they expand unemployment to furloughed employees or laid off employees, and they're basically taking the state unemployment insurance maximum weekly benefit and adding $600 to it. So you can, and I'll show you a slide of what that means, but that's huge because a lot of folks are really stuck with having to lay off their employees, and most states' unemployment insurance benefits are relatively low. So adding this to that really takes care of a lot of people, and I'll show you what that means. In addition, they have a $350 billion in assistance to small businesses, no detail on that yet. $550 billion in aid for corporations like airlines, cruise lines. Apparently Trump has been exempted from this, so I don't think his folks can be covered, his states can be covered, but I'm not quite sure yet. I know that was a sticking point. $150 billion in state and local stimulus. The next slide, so this I pulled out, this is just a sample of the weekly maximum unemployment insurance benefits for 2020 for these select states. So as you can see, New York, which is not on here, we're at $505, I think. So adding an additional $600 to that is a major expansion. So again, these are the maximum weekly benefits that are allowable. So if they make a lower income, they won't get all of this, but this provides a much, much thicker safety net to employees than if they hadn't passed it. This is a big deal for those of you who do have to lay off employees. So I'm moving on unless there's anything else, Paige, you would like me to cover on the Families First Coronavirus Response Act.
No, I think you've covered it.
Okay, awesome. So unfortunately, across the country, many businesses are under edicts with the states. I'm in New York, and we have a mandatory stay in place. A lot of companies have had to close down. They cannot operate because they don't have a business that accommodates a remote workforce. We have had other companies that have part of their employees can work and part of their employees can't work. The question remains, a lot of companies are wondering, are they essential? We've been getting a lot of those questions. What I recommend them to is the CISA website that gives you the identifying features of what are considered critical infrastructure businesses, so those what we would call essential businesses. What I would recommend you do to determine that, if you haven't already had to face it, because states are still going through the process of perhaps closing down, you need to look at both this site and the edict that came out from your government, your state government, in the orders that they exist, because they are also providing that definition. For example, we have insurance agencies. They are not covered under the CISA a definition, but the state did deem them as essential businesses. So you need to look at the two of them. But what you should always keep in mind, because of what we're facing, if you have any worker or segment of your workforce that can work from home, they should be working from home. Send them home, because that is the way that we socially separate and will get past this faster. If you have a segment that can work from home, hasn't worked from home, you don't want them to work from home, I would advise you to have them at least work a day or two at home now, so that they know what they can and can't do in case they end up having to work from home because of a risk of exposure or some kind of a stricter shutdown. I can tell you that the ones that we've had in New York have been evolving. They've gotten stricter and stricter and stricter until they basically shut us all down. So even if you don't want to do it, even if you haven't done it and encouraged folks to work from home, I would do it if you can. Those who have to shut down, I have received a lot of calls. What exists if I have to close down my workforce, right? So if I'm if I'm manufacturing printing materials, or if I'm manufacturing a heavy piece of equipment, building materials, if I can't work from home and I'm not essential and I have to close down, what do I have available for your employees? What I would tell you is this is one of those rubber bands and bubble gum. Beyond the unemployment insurance safety net, there really is nothing there. So continue to provide leave as much as you can, be as generous as you can, and then help your employees go through that transition. I would encourage you to have employees. I would encourage you to check with your insurance carriers, your health insurance carriers, your benefit carriers, to see if there's a way for them to maintain continuity of coverage while they are furloughed or laid off. That's going to be a carrier decision. But the research that you can do to help folks understand how to file for unemployment insurance, how those benefits might be affected if you have some PTO payout, how this new expansion, hopefully it gets rolled out quickly. If you can just provide that information to your employees to help soften that transition, reassure them without making a promise, because you don't know, but reassure them that you will hire back and we will be back to full strength as soon as possible. This is just a moment in time. None of us have a crystal ball, but we all have the same intentions, which is to do what we need to do to get past this and then to move on as quickly as we can. For those of you that are still in operation and are having folks come to the workforce, we've been asked a lot of questions around things like, do I test an employee who may have been on a cruise? I've got an employee who won't come to work. What do I do with her? Do I have to pay her? And every question in between. The first site I would recommend that everybody go to who's still in business is to the Google CDC business and coronavirus, or COVID. And you will come up with this interim guidance for businesses and employers to plan and respond to coronavirus disease 2019. A lot of really, really great stuff in here for advice on how to maintain a clean workplace, what to do if somebody shows up sick, what to do if somebody has tested positive, what to do if somebody has been potentially exposed. All of those types of questions are at least in concept provided here. So that's where I'm sending everybody first. There were questions in the past about whether or not coronavirus exposure is an EEOC or OSHA requirement for reporting. Normally a virus would not be, but in this case it is. So it is an OSHA reporting element. So just know, and I don't have that slide up here, but Google, there's a big document about it. Google OSHA and coronavirus, and you will get a wide range of resources for you. So those are sort of I'm trying, oh, look at that. I did it just within 30 minutes. So the next set are just a series of questions that we've been fielding. I'm going to go through them very quickly, and then I'm going to take your questions in any way that we can. But what happens if an employee self-quarantines and refuses to work out of fear? Well, one of the questions I would ask is if they are have a compromised health system, or if they are just afraid and don't want to go to work. What I would recommend you do with them is you understand that this is a super, super scary time. And if they truly are fearful, do not make them work. Whether that means you pay them or not is a different situation. If they are a compromised health system and they cannot work from home and they are fearful, I would do everything in your power to help at least provide some level of benefit or coverage to them before a layoff occurs. Again, if they are on your employment as of April 1st, they would not be eligible for those sick benefits unless they were sick or unless they were exposed or being tested or told by a doctor not to be there. So if they don't want to be there, I don't think I would make them be there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's any benefit or coverage for them if they're not. What if an employee's family member is at risk? This happens, this question comes up a lot. Actually, Paige and I were literally just talking about it before this webinar went live. If an employee's family member is at risk, but not sick, so let's say you have, your husband is immunocompromised and you're working outside of the house. That doesn't mean that the employee in this situation should be in any way changing what they do at work, unless that spouse's doctor says you need to quarantine in order to protect the health of your spouse. So just because you've been exposed to somebody who's at risk, if they're at risk, that doesn't really mean anything other than they are walking around with a heightened risk than anybody else. But it doesn't mean that they've been sick, they've been exposed, and so therefore there really is not that much of a work accommodation that would be required of you. If your employee claims that they've been exposed or sick but can provide no proof, I would, if they can get a doctor's note or some sort of guidance, you cannot require that, and I would not recommend that you have that employee go to the doctor, because God knows they're busy enough as it is. But if they say that they're sick, my gut is to err on the side of saying, okay, you can use up your PTO until it's over. But you don't want to be dragging somebody into the office that may be sick. That's what we're trying to avoid here. what is an employee available for if they're laid off or furloughed? Other than whatever remains of their PTO, it really is through the unemployment insurance benefits that they would have any kind of coverage. A note on laid off versus furloughed, there's really no difference. So those really mean the same thing. The intention is to say we want to hire you back as soon as we can, but to separate with them is essentially the same as if you would separate from any other employee unless you can do something to provide some level of benefits. Can I require my employees to get tested? Paige, what's your thought on that?
No, because unless they've come back or you know that they've been exposed, if they, if they know, that they have possibly been exposed, but being tested, not everybody's getting tested, so it's going to be hard to require that, and two, it is considered a medical procedure and a medical exam, which most employers can't require their employees to do. The one thing that we have, and I know you've got this later on, is they are, in this one case, allowing you to take employees' temperatures. However, you would have to do that for everybody, not just somebody who may or may not be exposed. If that's your guidelines, that you're going to take everybody's temp before they walk in the door, then you can do that. For this case only, that's usually not the case, so don't carry this forward next flu season. But that's the other thing. But I would not say you have to require a test, because honestly, most people wouldn't be able to get one anyway.
Right. And I know I tried to get one for my son and was not able to do that, but fortunately he's fine. So there you go. And on this, I think about, like, if your employees, if you're running a nursing home and there's a risk that you've got sick employees, then that would be a situation where, yes, you could test all of your employees, because it would be a health emergency that you would need to pursue. But if it's simply you have a manufacturing plant, outside of Rochester, New York, and you want to just test all your folks to make sure that they're clear, there is no availability of testing for that anyway. So anyway, those are sort of the teaser questions we've put out there, and I'm going to kick it over now to Emily. Do we have any questions that might have come in?
Oh, we have quite a few. So I will kick us off and get started with how do you inform your employees this doesn't apply because the business employs more than 500 people?
Well, I guess that's the good news and the bad news of having this not apply to you, because it doesn't apply. And I think, oftentimes we do the flip side. When we have small businesses that maybe have 40 employees or 35 employees, they don't have to provide family medical leave. Many of them do, because it's a good practice, because it's a helpful thing to do. So if you can find a way to provide that to your employees, it goes a long way toward addressing their concerns, and the benefit is not that rich. So I would dig in and crunch some numbers and see whether you can provide it. Otherwise, I would tell them this law does not apply to us, and so therefore you're not covered. I don't know why they didn't. I don't know why employers with more than 500 employees are not covered. But I would just, if you are unable and cannot provide that benefit, I would just be straight up with them. I think these are the times, and I've said this, I don't even know how many times in the last 2 weeks. You know what? Just be straight up. Tell it like it is. Tell them what you know, and that's really all you can do. Nobody wants to be misled right now. They just want to know the truth.
Yeah, I would add to that once the poster gets released, it probably would be a good practice to go ahead and post that. And then you are going to, post it, and so the employees can see that they aren't eligible. And I probably would issue some sort of notice and piggyback it, like Claudia said. Explain, you probably have heard about the Families First Corona Response Act. Just so you know, we're not covered by that because we have more than 500 employees. However, these are the benefits that the company offers that you can take advantage of, whether that's your medical leave or your ADA reasonable accommodation or FMLA if they're sick or their paid time off. So anybody, I think one of the reasons those larger companies aren't covered is because they are required to give a lot of those other things that some of the smaller companies aren't. They're already set up for. So I would advise them of what you are offering and what you do have available to them, whether it's your normal practice or something you're doing just for this time.
Great, thank you. Next question is, what if you have different corporate entities that are controlled with the same shareholder that have more than 500 total employees?
I don't know that we have any level of detail enough to be able to determine how they've defined that. Paige, have you seen that?
Yeah, they're looking at payrolls. So if one entity runs payroll for all the employees, then you probably have a better argument that you have 500 employees. If, however, there are separate EIN numbers and separate workers' comp and insurances and unemployment, and if all those things are normally kept separate, then you would probably not be. You would keep those individual. So I know some people are like have a joint employer relationship. Usually you're just going to look at that controlling thing. So as I said, so you look at your payroll, you know, what is the EIN number, how many employees are under that. That would be a good guide to figure out if where you qualify.
Great, thank you. The poster that you guys are talking about, when it's made available, where does that need to get posted? Does it need to be posted on all the different job sites, construction areas, you know, office buildings, etc.? Is one location okay?
Good question. We don't know.
Yeah.
Usually a poster like that has to get posted at every job site wherever you're going to have employees, you know, a break room or something like that. I know a lot of our clients go to other sites so that they don't actually have a work site. So if you can get it to your employees in some other way, via email or intranet or something like that, however you would get employees information, that would really, you know, that would be good as well. Basically, the idea is that you're going to have to notify all of your employees somehow about this law. So it will be a poster, you're going to print it out, you're going to tape it to the wall in the break room, wherever you have your other posters, you know, your FMLA and your OSHA and all those other wage and hour posters, you're going to put it right there. And put it everywhere that you can, because notification is a requirement. You do not have to put it in your handbook because it's temporary. Like some laws require that you add language to your handbook. You don't have to do that, but just make sure your employees get the information.
And I think Paige, because we have a lot of folks that are in the building service contract space, we'll see what we can find out and do a little digging on what that definition is for them and get that through BSCAI if we can find anything more on that.
Great, thanks, Claudia. Next question is, if people were to be laying off employees, what if they were laid off before the April 1st or 2nd date, but you want to provide the benefit because it is reimbursed by the government? Can you?
Well, the only thing that's reimbursed by the government is if somebody is out on sick leave or has is out on that emergency family leave to take care of a child. So those are really the only two programs that are currently reimbursed. So just that 10 days of sick leave for people that take it, and then anyone who needs that 10 weeks of partial pay to care for a child who's not in school if they take it.
Okay. So say someone, next question, is confirmed or ordered by their doctor to quarantine themselves right now, but this act, you know, covers that, but it doesn't go in effect until next week. Are they still covered because it was before, or are they not covered?
So actually, because I was going to clarify what I had just answered. So this is actually a perfect add-on. You're really good at moderating, Emily. This comes into effect April 1st. So any of that coverage does not go into effect, or the reimbursement does not go into effect until April 1st. So let's say somebody's out right now and they just went out today for 14 days quarantine. You would not be obligated to provide them with any paid leave between now and April 1st, but effective April 1st, they go on the clock for 10 days.
Perfect. Thank you, Claudia. Another few questions that we have are regards to payroll. So somebody said we could withhold the payroll tax each payroll. Is that correct?
I'm going to my understanding is that if you pay your Social Security payroll taxes each payroll, then yes, but most folks pay their Social Security payroll taxes on a less frequent basis. So if you pay your Social Security payroll taxes quarterly, then you would at the end of that quarter deduct whatever you withheld, whatever you paid out in order to comply with this law. But if you pay it weekly or bi-weekly, then whatever you had to pay out weekly or bi-weekly you could deduct. Did I say that wrong, Paige?
No, I think you're right. I will say I have an MBA. I do not have an MBA in accounting. So anything that has to do with taxes and refunds and rates and things like that, I would refer to your accountant to make sure that you get it right, because it's very important.
And I don't have an MBA at all, so there you go.
Great, thank you guys. A quick note, some people are asking about the slides and the recording. Again, these will be made available within 24 to 48 hours through your association, so you'll double check with them and on the website to find all of this information.
And there is, just to add on to that, Emily, there is, we did do a write-up that I think was distributed last Friday on the Family First Act. So that in addition to these slides, that resource is available, keeping in mind that we literally are still getting details and explanations about how things are being defined and rolled out as we speak.
Correct. Next question that we have is, do you know if this income will be considered for a retirement plan purpose at all?
I'd call that tax accountant that the page was just talking about. No clue.
Okay, great. If an employee takes 80 hours leave but is split between two pay periods, do I split the credit between the two pay periods, or can I claim it all up front?
Call that tax attorney.
Yeah, I would say that you can't take a credit for something you haven't paid out yet. So if if you're going to do it, like you take the credit with each payroll, then you can do it that way. Or if you're going to do it, like Claudia was saying, on a quarterly basis, then you would do it then. So, but you can't say, all right, I'm going to be paying them out 80 hours, and take the credit in advance. There is some language that if you need an advance for the funds, that you can get it. Again, we don't know how, but it is one of those things that how it's going to be split, because obviously everybody's payroll runs differently. Everybody's pay period is differently. So basically just know that if you pay it out, that's when you become eligible to get it. And also remember, it's on the related health care premiums as well. So it's not just the $511 or the $200 a day. So you want to make sure you can get back as much as you can for this.
And on that point, I've had a conversation with a couple of clients and friends who, some of them run really high weekly payrolls, right? So maybe, $100,000, $200,000, $250,000 in payroll on a biweekly basis. To provide 10 days could be, close to $1 million. This is a great time to have a conversation with your bank or lending institution to see about adjusting your line of credit taking into consideration the fact that you will be reimbursed this money. So it is a guaranteed reimbursement by the federal government. So if you're really sweating the potential hit on cash flow in order to accommodate for this, if your payroll is not sufficient, if your payroll tax, Social Security tax is not sufficient to cover this, then I think now is a great time to have a conversation about your available line of credit. And having said that, I know nothing more about that other than it seems like a good idea.
Great. Thanks, Claudia. Next question is, we have 4 employees in a workforce total of 15 that have refused to come into work out of fear. They have no doctor's advice, but only their own decision. Are they eligible for any of these benefits? We do not offer PTO or leave. We're a retail store, and they cannot work from home.
Okay. You know what? We've been fielding these calls all day long, and the answer is they are not eligible for any of these leaves as that question has been structured, because they are not sick, they are not under quarantine, they are not caring for somebody who is sick, and they're not caring for somebody. So I think in that instance, what the best thing to do for them to do would be to lay them off. And then they would get unemployment insurance, and hopefully an expanded unemployment insurance when what our good members of Congress are debating right now goes through. Other than that, there really is nothing else. And honestly, my feeling is if somebody's really afraid to come in, I would respect that. This is terrifying to a lot of people. So, you know, if they don't want to come in, they could be because they're afraid for their own health or the health if they live with the grandparents. Who knows what the situation is. I would respect it, and you know, if you can't offer anything, you can't offer anything. And again, God willing, and the creek don't rise, this too shall pass.
And I will add to that if you're going to take that route, which I think is, you know, if you have employees who are unwilling to come into work, then that's obviously your option. But I would also probably have individual conversations with them and explain that they're not eligible for this paid time off unless they meet these, you know, the exact parameters, because they may have something going on at home or in their own health that you don't know about. And so this may be the opportunity for them to say, well, I didn't want you to know, but my doctors told me I need to stay home because. So if that's the, you know, if you want to give them the option, give them the information so they know that they can come to you, that it's kept confidential, that, you know, and you know, but these are the facts, so that you are giving them it if they qualify. But if they don't, then this is what you're going to have to do.
I think that's a really, really great point, and it reemphasizes the perspective of having those one-on-one conversations with each person. I mean, obviously, if you have a massive workforce, you won't necessarily have that opportunity, but you know, this is a case-by-case situation. Everybody's situation is going to be different, and to the extent that you can accommodate each of those, remember, I mean, up until 20 minutes ago, we had a massive labor shortage, and none of us can find talent. We don't know what it's going to be like on the other side of this, but hopefully we will remember that we really want to retain the talent that we have, because it's easier to do than finding all new talent.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next question, is the unemployment benefit not reimbursable?
Again, we don't know any of the details about this. So unemployment is a state-provided insurance benefit. So it doesn't go through your coffers or any employer's coffers at all. I did get the question earlier about if with the increased benefit, would your tax assessment, your unemployment insurance tax assessment go up? Again, we don't know any of the details about that, so we really can't speak to it because it's still just a concept.
The only thing I do know is that one of the changes that they're making is usually in unemployment, they do a look back period, right? So it's like, not the most recent quarter, but the 4 of the last 5 quarters or something like that. Most states have some fancy thing. They're not doing that. They're only looking at the current situation. So that may impact your rates. I don't know if because of this situation, since everybody's facing the same situation, if it won't affect them long term. that's a whole other, a whole different conversation, but they are looking at a different period than they do normally.
And I do think on top of that, from what I've read, that they are contemplating, and again, we're surmising here because we haven't seen anything written down, that they are going to waive the work requirement, because I know, for example, in New York State, you cannot collect unemployment benefits without being actively looking for another job, and they're going to waive that for employees who are furloughed.
Great, thank you. Next question, can you ask for any type of proof that parents are the only caregiver for the 10-week coverage for caring for children?
So this is a good question, and I'm going to kick it over to Paige because you also had the intermittent question, Paige.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think that the documentation that's going to be required for a lot of these things is going to be off the cuff, and you're going to have to roll with it. Normally, we can ask for very specific documentation, but this isn't one of those situations. I think if somebody's child's school is closed, then they are eligible for the child care pay, because a lot of daycares and child care providers are closed. If the kids aren't in school but they go to daycare, if the daycare is closed, because one of the big things is that with this, grandparents can't watch kids because of the exposure. So there's a lot of this. Now some people can, and again, if somebody can get a babysitter, great. But I think if a parent says my child's school or daycare is closed, I need to watch them, I think just find some proof that their school or daycare is closed and take that.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I have that I know that a lot of clients have brought up is about if this can be taken intermittently. For example, if two parents are, do both parents have to take the time off if only one really needs to stay home with the child? Or do they have to do it, one takes 2 weeks off straight, or can they alternate? So those are some of the questions that I'm hoping that we get more clarity, and we will know that, and hopefully we'll know those answers by the end of this week.
Great, thank you. Kind of the same question. Will we be required to provide proof of meeting the requirements when paying sick leave pay?
I think if you pay it, then that's the requirement, right?
Yeah,
so
that's the proof.
My suggestion is, if possible, in your payroll system or however you track it, come up with a special code. You have a code for vacation, you have a code for sick, you have a code for regular wages. Come up with a code that it shows that this is the emergency sick pay time or the emergency family medical leave pay time, and classify that if you can. And then that way, that will show that you're paying this and why the rate is only 2/3 if it's not the full amount, and things like that. So if you can show that you're paying somebody, but if not, then it's going to be on their check stub or whatever. Everybody has to keep payroll records. So I think the proof is going to be the fact that you paid it. That again, anything more specific than that, I don't know. But if you pay it and you can record and notate it somehow, then I think that will be your documentation, your proof.
Great. So next question is, if this is a second job at night, can employees get paid at the day job and the second job?
I would assume they could. I don't know what would preclude them from doing that. If I am a part-time employee and I get sick with coronavirus, I would think I would be eligible for the 10 days of prorated sick leave from each of those two employers.
I would agree with that, just simply because, again, you're only looking at a portion of the wages. So, if the person normally needs 2 jobs to make ends meet and they're now not going to be at either one of them, then I think that's, they would be qualified under both. I haven't seen an answer one way or the other. I've written it down on my list of questions because it's a great question, but I would assume yes.
Got it. Okay.
Also remember that the other employer may not fall under this.
Correct.
So you can't say that the employee, your other job will be paying you. It doesn't matter. They may not. You can only do what you are legally required to do.
Yep. Okay. I know we have just about one more minute here for questions. So again, I know there were so many questions that came in and trying to get through all of them within a half an hour. We're doing our best, but if there's any specific questions, Claudia's and Paige's information is right on the screen here, so you can jot that down to reach out to them too. And the last question that we have is, how are we supposed to post the notice if everyone is working from home? Should we email this notice to the employees?
I would do that. Yeah, I would email it. I would put it on, if you have a web portal for your employee benefits or that sort of thing, I would do that there, email it to them. Yeah, I think, you know what, look, this is, again, bubblegum, just to wrap this whole puppy up. Bubble gum and rubber bands. So whereas you may have much more specific and orchestrated posting requirements for your other federal requirements, we're just trying to get through this. So if you notify them, you let them know, that should suffice if you're really doing your best, or at least, you know, that would be my hope on how things are, you know, administered going forward.
One more question that I thought a lot of people would find value in is, how do we keep employees from abusing these new policies?
Well,
we get this question in form or fashion and in so many different ways. Yes. As with anything like this would fall under, you know, the states that have paid sick leave and things like that. If you can't, I would just advise employees and know that they have 10 days to take time off, paid time off. Once that expires, if they need more, they don't get it. So if someone's going to try to just take time off because they want to have a staycation for a couple of weeks, but then they become sick, that's unpaid.
And the only thing I would add to that is, again, this is a public health emergency. Yes, you're going to have some, I had one client describe his employees as knuckleheads who are going to try and game the system. But you know what? It's really not your job to evaluate whether or not they truly are sick or not sick in this work environment. And the good news here is that unlike your other leave and benefits, you're getting fully reimbursed for it. So in my mind, even though you probably suspect whether they're really sick or not, err on the side of assuming that they are what they say they are, so as to not risk, you know, it'd be much, much, much worse to bring somebody in who is sick than to let them, you know, take the leave as it's allowed. And again, the good news is, you're going to get covered for whatever out-of-pocket costs you have to provide that leave to them. So,
I will say I've got the DOL website up on my computer at all times. They just actually released the poster. So, and they actually have something about posting it, and they specifically say, where do I post it? It has to be posted in a conspicuous place. The employer may satisfy this requirement by emailing or direct mailing this notice to employees who are not on site, or posting this notice on the internal or external website. So every employee has to get notice, and so post it up. It cannot go just in a binder. It has to be posted up somewhere. You can put it up if somebody's on a location, get them the information. That really is the key thing. And the poster is up now. I think it says it is. So yes, there it is. So
Google and USDOL. There you go.
Yeah. So it's the DOL.gov, and the poster is there. And as I said, they uploaded that within the last 45 minutes. So they're rolling things out. It's just taking a little bit of time.
Great. Thank you, guys. I know that.
I should say, sorry, that it looks like there are maybe two different posters. There's one for employees and one for federal employees. So make sure that you post up the right one. Your federal employees are obviously those of the government, so post up the employee rights one.
And we don't know right now whether they will have a Spanish translation one, but I imagine that question is being asked by many of you sitting on this webinar right now.
Great. Thank you, guys. I know that we're a few minutes after the hour here, so I just want to thank everybody for submitting their questions, everyone in the audience, as well as a big thank you to our speakers, Paige and Claudia, today. Before you leave, if you haven't already, please provide your feedback within these 3 poll questions that I have launched on the screen, and we really appreciate you taking the time to answer those. We will be following up again with a recording and today's presentation materials within 24 to 48 hours of this webinar. And we want to just thank you guys all for attending and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, and thank you, Emily, for all of the hard work that you've put in, and we hope that everybody on this call has a very safe, healthy, and corona-free days ahead. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.